The grease-laden air of the diner clung to my clothes, a second skin I could never fully scrub away. It was a smell of desperation, of burnt coffee and cheap frying oil, the scent of my life for the past 6 months. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, turning the city into a smear of weeping neon lights. Inside, it was just another Tuesday night, which meant it was slow, the handful of patrons nursing lukewarm cups of coffee as if they held the secrets to the universe. My feet ached, a dull, throbbing pain that started in my heels and radiated up my spine, a constant reminder of the 16 hours I'd been standing. But the physical pain was a dull whisper compared to the screaming panic in my chest. Rent was due tomorrow. $475 I did not have. Leo's inhaler prescription needed a refill. Another $80. The electricity bill, already a month overdue, had arrived with a final notice, its red lettering like a slap in the face. It was a mountain of debt, and I was at the bottom, being crushed by its weight. I clutched the damp dishcloth in my hand, my knuckles white. My son, my sweet 6-year-old Leo, was the only thing that kept me from simply lying down on the cracked linoleum floor and giving up. His little face, pale from the persistent cough that rattled his small frame, was a constant image behind my eyes. He was staying with Mrs. Gable, our elderly neighbor, who watched him for a pittance I still struggled to pay. He deserved so much more than this. He deserved a mother who wasn't perpetually exhausted and terrified. He deserved a father who hadn't gambled away their future on the turn of a card, leaving us with nothing but his debts and the hollow echo of his empty promises. The bell over the door chimed, a tinny, cheerful sound that was utterly at odds with the atmosphere. I didn't look up immediately. It was probably just another trucker looking for a cheap meal. I finished wiping down the sticky countertop, the motion automatic, my mind still churning through impossible calculations. Find another job? I was already working a full-time nursing position at the clinic and picking up every extra shift here I could get. There were no more hours in the day. Ask for another advance? My boss, Sal, was a good man, but he wasn't a charity. Table for 3. The voice cut through my frantic thoughts like a shard of glass. It was deep, resonant, and carried an authority that did not belong in a place like this. I finally looked up, and my breath caught in my throat. There were 3 of them, all dressed in immaculate black suits that probably cost more than my apartment building. They seemed to suck the very air out of the room, their presence a stark, imposing contrast to the worn-out vinyl booths and flickering fluorescent lights. 2 of them were broad-shouldered and stoic, their eyes scanning the diner with a professional alertness that was deeply unsettling. They were flanks, bodyguards, predators in tailored clothing. But it was the man in the middle who held my gaze. He was tall, with a lean, powerful build that his expensive suit couldn't conceal. His hair was as black as a raven's wing, slicked back from a face that looked like it was carved from granite. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jawline shadowed with perfectly trimmed stubble, and a mouth that looked like it had never formed a genuine smile. But his eyes, they were the color of dark, stormy water, and they missed nothing. He looked around the shabby diner, not with disdain, but with a quiet, assessing intensity, as if he were memorizing every crack in the walls, every stain on the floor. He was handsome, devastatingly so, but it was a dangerous kind of beauty, the kind that warned you to stay away. I swallowed, forcing my professional waitress smile into place. Of course, right this way. My voice sounded thin and reedy. I led them to the cleanest booth in the back corner, away from the other patrons. It was an instinct, a need to sequester this palpable danger from the mundane misery of the rest of the room. They slid into the booth, the leader taking the seat that faced the door. Of course he did. I handed them the plastic-coated menus, my fingers trembling slightly. I prayed they didn't notice. "I'll be back in a moment to take your order," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I retreated to the relative safety of the counter, my heart hammering against my ribs. Sal poked his head out from the kitchen, his eyes wide. He gestured at them with his spatula. "Who are they? The feds?" he whispered hoarsely. "I have no idea," I whispered back. "They look like they own the city." "Well, whatever they want, give it to them," he said, before disappearing back into the steam and sizzle of the kitchen. I took a deep breath, grabbing my notepad, and walked back to the table. The leader's dark eyes snapped to me the moment I approached. It was like being targeted by a hawk. "Are you ready to order?" I asked, my gaze fixed on the notepad. "Coffee, black," the leader said. His voice was like aged whiskey, smooth but with a definite burn. "Just coffee?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. One of the other men spoke, his voice gravelly. "3 black coffees," I nodded, scribbling it down, and fled. My hands were shaking so badly I sloshed some of the hot coffee onto the saucer as I carried it back. I set the cups down with meticulous care, avoiding the leader's magnetic gaze. They didn't speak. They just sat there, nursing their coffees, their silence more intimidating than any threat. The other customers began to finish up and leave, unnerved by the silent, imposing figures in the corner. Soon, it was just them. I stayed busy, wiping down counters that were already clean, refilling salt shakers, anything to avoid acknowledging them, but I could feel his eyes on me. It was a physical sensation, a weight on my skin. He was watching my every move. Why? What could a man like him possibly want in a place like this, with a person like me? The panic I'd been suppressing all night began to bubble up again, hot and acidic. The rent, Leo, the notice, the sheer suffocating hopelessness of it all. An idea, born of pure, undiluted desperation, sparked in my mind. It was insane. It was stupid. It was dangerous. But what did I have left to lose? My hand shook as I tore a small corner from my notepad. My pen hovered over the paper. What could I even write? Help me? Pathetic. I'm in trouble? Obvious. My life felt like a sentence fragment, a story with no end in sight. I thought of a line from a poem I'd read in college, something that had stuck with me. "The quiet desperation is the loudest sound." It was all I could think of that encapsulated the suffocating silence of my struggle. With a trembling hand, I wrote the words on the small scrap of paper. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a terrible idea. He was a dangerous man. This could be interpreted in 1,000 wrong ways. But the part of me that was tired of drowning, the part that was willing to grasp at a floating piece of wreckage, even a sharp and splintered one, took over. After another 30 minutes of tense silence, the leader signaled for the check. I walked over, my legs feeling like lead. I placed the small bill on the table, $9.63. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a wallet made of leather so fine it looked like silk. He laid a crisp $100 bill on top of the check. My eyes widened. It was more than I'd make in 2 nights of tips. As my hand reached for it, I did it. In a single swift motion, I slipped the folded scrap of paper from my apron pocket and placed it under the bill, my fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface of the table. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice thick. "Have a good night." I turned and walked away, my entire body buzzing with adrenaline. I expected him to call out, to question me. I expected one of his men to grab my arm, but there was only silence. I busied myself at the cash register, pretending to count the meager earnings from the drawer. I could feel them getting up. I heard the scrape of the booth, the soft thud of their footsteps on the linoleum. I risked a glance in the small, cracked mirror behind the counter. I saw one of the bodyguards reach for the bill, but the leader held up a hand, stopping him. He picked up the money himself, his long, elegant fingers closing around the bill and the note hidden beneath it. Then, without a backward glance, they were gone, the little bell over the door chiming their departure into the rainy night. I leaned against the counter, my legs finally giving out. I slid down to the floor, burying my face in my hands. What have I done? I had just slipped a cryptic, desperate note to a man who was almost certainly a high-level criminal, a mobster, a gangster. Whatever the term, he radiated a power that was not born of boardrooms and stock markets. It was a primal, dangerous power. He could ignore it. He could crumple it up and throw it away, and I would be left with $90 in change and the same mountain of problems. Or he could be intrigued. He could be angry. He could come back. And that thought was the most terrifying of all. Sal came out. "They gone? They pay?" I nodded, unable to speak. I pushed myself up and showed him the $100 bill. His eyes went wide. "Holy cannoli. What'd you do to earn that, Alara?" "I just gave him his coffee, Sal." I lied, my voice shaking. "He was just generous," Sal grunted, not entirely believing me, but he took the bill to make change. "Well, don't get used to it. Guys like that are trouble." "You have no idea," I thought, as I mechanically went through the motions of closing up the diner. I wiped down the last table, stacked the chairs, and mopped the floor, my mind a whirlwind of fear and regret. The $90 in my pocket felt like a brand, a down payment on a deal I hadn't understood I was making. By the time I finally pushed open the back door and stepped into the damp, garbage-scented alley, it was nearly 2 a.m. The rain had softened to a miserable drizzle. I pulled my thin jacket tighter, the cold seeping into my bones. All I wanted was to get to Mrs. Gable's, pick up my sleeping son, and crawl into bed. I had taken maybe 3 steps when the headlights flashed on, blinding me. Not one set of headlights. 4. They sliced through the darkness, illuminating the grimy brick walls and overflowing dumpsters in stark, terrifying detail. My heart leaped into my throat. 4 identical black SUVs, engines purring like resting panthers, blocked the alley entrance. They hadn't been there a second ago. They had appeared out of nowhere, silent and sudden. My first instinct was to run, to scramble back into the diner, but the back door had already locked behind me. My hand fumbled with the knob, my fingers slick with sweat and fear. It wouldn't budge. I was trapped. The doors of the lead SUV opened. 2 men got out, not the same men from the diner, but men of the same mold. Big, imposing, dressed in dark suits. My mind went blank with terror. This was about the note. I had been so stupid, so incredibly, monumentally stupid. They were going to hurt me, or worse. Then, the back door of the lead vehicle opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. It was the stoic bodyguard from the diner, the one who had spoken for them. He walked toward me, his footsteps silent on the wet pavement. He stopped a few feet away, his expression calm, professional. It was the calm that was so terrifying. "Alara Jensen?" he asked. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Hearing my full name spoken by this man in this alley sent a fresh wave of ice-cold fear through me. How did he know my name? My name wasn't on my uniform. Whose? Asking, I managed to squeak out, my voice a pathetic imitation of defiance. Mr. Moretti sent me, he said, as if that explained everything. Moretti? So the hawk had a name. He requests your presence. Requests? I choked out a laugh that sounded more like a sob. This doesn't look like a request. I gestured wildly at the fleet of luxury tanks and the small army of men in suits. The man's expression didn't flicker. It is a request you will not be refusing. Please, come with me. We don't have much time. I'm not going anywhere with you, I said, backing away until my back hit the cold, wet brick of the alley wall. I have to go get my son. The words tumbled out. A desperate plea. Leo. I had to get to Leo. Leo is being taken care of, the man said calmly. The world tilted on its axis. What? What do you mean? Where is he? The panic I'd been holding at bay crashed over me in a tidal wave. They had my son. Oh God, they had my son. A car has been dispatched to Mrs. Gable's residence. They have instructions to retrieve him and his belongings and bring them to the estate. A pediatrician is waiting for him there. The sheer, breathtaking efficiency of it all stole my breath. They knew where I worked. They knew my name. They knew about Leo. They knew who Mrs. Gable was. In the less than 2 hours since I had slipped him that stupid note, this man, this Mr. Moretti, had unraveled the pathetic tapestry of my life and now held all the threads in his hand. This wasn't an invitation. This was an abduction, an extraction. You can't do this, I whispered, tears finally breaking free and tracing hot tracks down my cold cheeks. Mr. Moretti can do anything he wants, the man said, his voice softening by a fraction, a tiny sliver of something that might have been pity. He is not a man who likes to see loose ends. Your note. It was a loose end. Now, please, it is better for everyone if you come quietly. He opened the back door of the SUV, revealing an interior of plush cream leather and polished wood. It smelled of wealth and power. It smelled like him, numb with terror, feeling as if I were moving through a dream. I did as I was told. I slid onto the buttery soft seat. The door closed with a solid, final-sounding thunk, sealing me inside, sealing my fate. The convoy of black SUVs pulled out of the alley as silently as they had arrived, leaving the grime and desperation of my old life behind. I was being driven into the heart of the hawk's nest, and I had no idea if I would ever be allowed to fly free again. The journey was a blur of rain-streaked city lights and suffocating silence. I sat rigid, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap, my knuckles were bloodless. The bodyguard, who had introduced himself as Roman, sat in the passenger seat, a silent, stoic sentinel. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to beat my fists against the tinted window, but a paralyzing fear kept me mute. They had Leo. That was the only fact that mattered, the cold, hard stone at the center of my panic. As long as they had him, I would do anything they said. We left the city behind, the landscape transitioning from concrete and neon to winding roads, and the dark, imposing shapes of trees. We passed through a set of massive, wrought iron gates that opened for us without a sound, as if by magic. A long, gravel driveway curved through a perfectly manicured landscape, finally revealing the house. It wasn't a house, it was a fortress. A modern monolith of glass, steel, and dark stone that seemed to rise out of the hillside itself. It was all clean lines and sharp angles, cold and imposing, yet lights glowed from within, promising a warmth that seemed entirely at odds with its forbidding exterior. It was the most beautiful and terrifying place I had ever seen. The SUV pulled to a stop under a wide portico, and the door was opened for me before the engine was even cut. I stepped out, my worn-out sneakers sinking into a plush, dark red rug that covered the stone steps. Roman was beside me instantly. "This way, Miss Jensen," he said, his hand hovering near the small of my back, not touching but guiding, a subtle assertion of control. He led me through a pair of massive wooden doors into a foyer that was larger than my entire apartment. The floors were polished white marble that reflected the light from a chandelier that looked like a cascade of frozen diamonds. The air was still and cool, scented faintly with something clean and expensive, like sandalwood and citrus. There was no clutter, no sign of life, just vast, empty spaces and priceless-looking art on the walls. It was a museum, a temple to wealth and power. It was his world. And it was a world away from the sticky countertops and chipped coffee mugs of my own. "Where is my son?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "The doctor is with him now, in the East Wing suite," Roman replied smoothly. "He was asleep when my men arrived." They were instructed to be as discreet as possible. Mrs. Gable was compensated generously for her trouble and assured that you had a family emergency. Compensated. They had bought her silence. They had thought of everything. The sheer, cold-blooded competence of it all was staggering. It made my little act of desperation in the diner feel like a child playing with matches in a munitions factory. "I want to see him." "In a moment. Mr. Moretti is waiting for you in his study." He gestured down a long, wide hallway. Each step I took on the marble floor felt like a step deeper into the lion's den. He stopped before a set of double doors made of dark, polished wood, and knocked once, a soft, respectful rap. "Enter," a familiar voice commanded from within. My heart did a painful little flip. Roman opened the door and stood aside. "Miss Jensen, sir." I stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind me, leaving me alone with him. The study was as imposing as the rest of the house, but it felt more personal. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. A fire crackled in a large stone fireplace, casting a warm, flickering glow over the room. And behind a massive desk of dark, gleaming wood sat Dante Moretti. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket anymore. He was in his shirt sleeves, the fine white cotton stretched taut across his broad shoulders. His tie was loosened, and the top button of his shirt was undone, revealing the strong column of his throat. He held the small, crumpled scrap of paper I had given him between his thumb and forefinger, his dark eyes fixed on me. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. He just watched me, his gaze intense, stripping me bare, seeing all the fear and desperation I was trying so hard to hide. Finally, he spoke, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the quiet room. "The quiet desperation is the loudest sound." He read the words aloud, then placed the note carefully on his desk, as if it were a piece of evidence. An interesting choice of words for a waitress. "I wasn't always a waitress," I said, finding a sliver of my voice. "I'm a nurse." "I know," he said simply. "Alara Jensen, 28 years old. Graduated top 10% of your class from City College of Nursing. You work at the community clinic in the Glades. You pick up shifts at Sal's Diner to make ends meet. You have a son, Leo, age 6. He suffers from chronic asthma. Your ex-partner, Liam Doyle, is a gambling addict who cleared out your joint savings account 8 months ago, leaving you with approximately $6,000 in credit card debt and 2 months of back rent. He recited the facts of my miserable life as if he were reading a grocery list. Each word was a nail hammering me into place. How? How do you know all that? I whispered, horrified. When something piques my interest, I make it my business to know everything, he said, his eyes never leaving mine. And you, Miss Jensen, have piqued my interest. He stood up and walked around the desk, his movements fluid and predatory. He stopped a few feet in front of me. Up close, he was even more intimidating. He was taller than I'd realized, and he radiated a raw, contained energy that made the air around him feel charged. Why did you give me this note? I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I don't know, I said honestly. It was a moment of weakness, desperation. I didn't expect this. What did you expect? He pressed, his voice soft but relentless. A generous tip? A kind word? I expected you to throw it away, I admitted, my gaze dropping to the floor. I needed to do something. Anything. I felt like I was screaming and no one could hear me. He was silent for a long moment. I chanced to look up at him. His expression was unreadable, a mask of cold control. But there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something I couldn't name. Understanding? Empathy? It seemed impossible. I heard you, he said, and the simple words hit me with the force of a physical blow. He leaned against the front of his desk, crossing his arms over his powerful chest. The movement was casual, but the intensity of his focus never wavered. I am going to make you an offer, Miss Jensen, and I advise you to listen very carefully. My chin lifted. I'm not for sale. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a cold, humorless thing. Everything is for sale. It's just a matter of finding the right price. I am prepared to solve all of your problems. Your debt will be cleared, all of it. Your son will receive the best medical care money can buy. A team of specialists will be at his disposal. You will never have to worry about a bill, a prescription, or a late notice ever again. I stared at him, my mind reeling. It was everything I had been praying for, a miracle delivered by the devil himself. What's the catch? I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. Men like you don't do things out of the kindness of their hearts. That is true, he conceded, his gaze unflinching. I am not a kind man. My conditions are simple. You and your son will live here, in this house. You will be under my protection. You will not leave these grounds without my permission and my security. Your ex-partner, Liam Doyle, I will handle him. He will never bother you or your son again. In return for this, you will want for nothing. You will have security, comfort, and peace of mind, everything your life currently lacks. It was a gilded cage. He was offering to lock me away in a beautiful prison. And what do you get out of it? I demanded. Why do this for a complete stranger? He pushed off the desk and took a step closer. He smelled of sandalwood and power. I told you. You piqued my interest. Let's just say, I have a dislike for messes. Your life is a mess, created by a weak, contemptible man. I have the means and the desire to clean it up. I also have an aversion to seeing a woman like you, a woman with strength and fight in her eyes, being crushed by circumstances she did not create. He paused, his gaze dropping to my mouth for a fraction of a second before returning to my eyes. And perhaps I am simply a collector of rare and beautiful things that catch my eye. The implication hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. I was to be his newest acquisition, a possession. My first instinct was to refuse, to spit his offer back in his face. But then I thought of Leo, sleeping in a comfortable bed just a few hallways away, a doctor watching over him. I thought of the crushing weight of my debt, the constant grinding fear. What was my pride worth compared to my son's health and safety? Why should I trust you? I asked, my voice trembling. You shouldn't, he said, his honesty a cold slap. Trust is earned, but you can trust my resources. You can trust my reputation. When I say I will do something, it is done. And when I decide to protect something, nothing in this world can harm it. There was a conviction in his voice that was absolute. He wasn't boasting. He was stating a fact. He was a force of nature, a storm, and he was offering to shelter me in his eye. I want to see my son, I said, deflecting. I needed to see Leo, to ground myself. He nodded. Of course. Roman will show you to your suite. He walked back to his desk and pressed a nearly invisible button on its surface. A second later, the door opened and Roman stood there. Take Miss Jensen to the East Wing. See that she and the boy have everything they need. Sir, Roman said with a nod. I turned to leave, but Dante's voice stopped me at the door. Ilara. He had never used my first name before. I turned back. He was standing by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantelpiece, the flames casting dancing shadows across his handsome, forbidding face. You haven't given me your answer. I need to think, I said. There is nothing to think about, he replied, his voice soft but steely. You can accept my protection, or you can return to your life of quiet desperation. But your son stays here. The choice is yours. It was an ultimatum, not a choice. He was leaving me no room to maneuver. He knew my weakness. My Achilles heel was my love for my son. He was using it against me with surgical precision. Tears of frustration and helplessness pricked my eyes. I blinked them back, refusing to cry in front of him again. You're a monster, I whispered. He didn't deny it. Perhaps, he said, his dark eyes holding mine, but even monsters can be useful. Go to your son, Ilara. We will speak again in the morning. Roman led me through a labyrinth of silent, elegantly appointed hallways. My mind was a chaotic jumble of fear, anger, and a bewildering sense of relief. I was a prisoner, but for the first time in months, the frantic, screaming panic in my chest had quieted to a dull roar. Roman stopped at another set of double doors and pushed one open. Your suite, Miss Jensen. I stepped inside and my breath hitched. It was not a room. It was an apartment, larger and more luxurious than any I had ever imagined. A spacious living area with a plush white sofa, a fireplace, and a wall of glass overlooking a darkened garden. To one side was a kitchenette stocked with high-end appliances. Roman pointed to a door. That is your bedroom and adjoining bath. And through here, he led me to another door and opened it. My heart squeezed. The room was decorated in soft blues and whites. In the center was a child's bed, and sleeping peacefully in it, tucked under a soft duvet, was Leo. His small face, so often pinched with worry or the strain of trying to breathe, was relaxed in sleep. His chest rose and fell in a slow, even rhythm. He wasn't coughing. A woman in neat professional scrubs stood up from a chair in the corner. He's fine, she said in a kind, quiet voice. His vitals are excellent. We've administered a nebulizer treatment with a new medication. He should sleep soundly through the night. On a nearby table I saw it. The new inhaler, a nebulizer machine, and several other boxes of medication that I knew cost a small fortune. There were also toys, building blocks, a fleet of colorful toy cars, and a stuffed bear so large it was almost as big as Leo. My knees felt weak with a dizzying mix of gratitude and resentment. Dante Moretti had accomplished in 2 hours what I had been failing at for months. I walked over to Leo's bed and gently brushed a stray curl from his forehead. His skin was cool and dry. He looked peaceful. He looked healthy. Tears I had refused to shed in front of Dante now streamed freely down my face. I was trapped. I was owned. But my son was safe. For a mother drowning in a sea of fear, that was the only lifeline that mattered. I looked around the beautiful, opulent room, at my sleeping child, and I knew there was no choice. There had never been a choice. I had walked into the hawk's nest, and now it was my home. Later, after the doctor had left, and Roman had assured me that guards were posted outside our suite and in the gardens, I sat on the edge of Leo's bed, just watching him breathe. The quiet, even sound was the most beautiful music in the world. I couldn't bring myself to go to my own room, a palatial space with a bed so large it felt obscene and a bathroom carved from marble. Instead, I curled up in the large, comfortable armchair in the corner of Leo's room, pulling a soft cashmere throw over myself. The sheer luxury of it all was disorienting. The fabric was softer than anything I had ever touched. The air was clean and temperature-controlled. It was a world away from my cramped apartment with its rattling radiator and the constant smell of damp. But this comfort came at a price. The price was my freedom. I was a bird in a gilded cage, and Dante Moretti was my keeper. I replayed our conversation in my mind. His cold, clinical recitation of my life's failures, his arrogant, possessive offer, a collector of rare and beautiful things. The words sent a chill down my spine, but also a strange, unwelcome flutter in my stomach. No one had ever looked at me the way he had. Liam, my ex, had looked at me with a mixture of affection and, ultimately, careless disregard. Men on the street looked with fleeting appreciation, but Dante's gaze was different. It was an appraisal. It was ownership. It was absolute focus. It was terrifying, and a dark, shameful part of me found it thrilling. I must have drifted off, because I was startled awake by a soft knock on the suite door. The sun was just beginning to stream through the large windows, painting the room in pale morning light. I looked at the clock on the bedside table. It was just after 7. Leo was still sleeping soundly. I crept out of his room, closing the door softly behind me, and went to answer the main door to the suite. A young woman in a simple, neat black dress stood there holding a tray. "Good morning, miss. Mr. Moretti thought you might appreciate some coffee." She smiled politely. On the tray was a silver pot, a delicate china cup and saucer, and a small plate of pastries that looked like they belonged in a magazine. "Thank you," I murmured, taking the tray. The coffee was rich and fragrant, nothing like the burnt sludge from the diner. I sat on the plush white sofa, sipping the coffee, feeling like an imposter in someone else's life. This was my new reality: servants, fine china, and a constant, unnerving sense of being watched. An hour later, after I had showered in a bathroom that was bigger than my old kitchen, using soap that smelled of roses and vanilla, there was another knock. This time, it was Roman. "Good morning, Miss Jensen. Mr. Moretti would like you to join him for breakfast." It wasn't a request. I glanced back at Leo's room. "My son. The doctor has already been in to check on him. He is still sleeping. There is a baby monitor on the table. It is connected to my security system. You will be alerted to the slightest sound. He is perfectly safe." Once again, they had thought of everything. Resigned, I followed Roman out of the suite and down a different hallway to a bright, sun-drenched room with a wall of glass that opened onto a stone terrace. A table was set for two with a simple but elegant breakfast. Dante was already there, standing by the open glass doors, looking out at the sprawling gardens. He was dressed in dark trousers and a soft gray cashmere sweater that made him look less like a crime boss and more like the lord of a manor. He turned as I entered, and his dark eyes swept over me. I was wearing a pair of simple jeans and a soft sweater I'd found in the closet of my room. They fit perfectly, of course. "Good morning, Alara," he said, his voice smoother, less harsh than the night before. "Did you sleep well?" "Not really," I answered honestly. "It will take time to adjust," he said, gesturing for me to sit. He sat opposite me as a silent server filled my plate with eggs, fruit, and toast. The food was delicious, but I could barely taste it. My stomach was a knot of anxiety. "Have you considered my offer?" he asked, after a few minutes of silence. "You didn't give me a choice," I pointed out, setting my fork down. "You told me my son was staying here regardless." "I stated a fact," he corrected gently. "The choice was whether you would stay with him. A choice I was confident you would make. You are a good mother." The compliment coming from him was disarming. "What do you want from me, Dante?" I asked, using his first name for the first time. It felt strange and dangerous on my tongue. He paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. He looked at me, his expression serious. "For now, I want you to relax. I want you to let the doctors take care of your son. I want you to eat, to sleep, to remember what it feels like not to be terrified every second of the day. I want you to accept my protection. And in the long term?" I pressed. "In the long term," he said, his gaze intense. "We will see." Before I could respond, his phone, which was sitting face down on the table, buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and a flicker of annoyance crossed his features. He answered it, his voice dropping back into its commanding, businesslike tone. "Yes?" He listened for a moment, his jaw tightening. "Where?" "No, do not engage. I want eyes on them, that's all. Report every move they make. I'll handle it." He ended the call and placed the phone back on the table. The brief moment of civility was gone. The dangerous man was back. "Trouble?" I asked, unable to stop myself. He gave me a sharp look. "Nothing that concerns you. If I'm going to be living in your house, under your protection, then I think it does concern me." I countered, my bravery fueled by a sudden spike of anger. "What was that about? Who are they?" He studied me for a long moment, as if weighing his options. I expected him to shut me down, to tell me to mind my own business. Instead, he surprised me. "The men in the diner last night," he began, his voice low. "We were not there for the coffee. That diner is on the edge of territory that belongs to a rival, a family called the Falcones. They have been making moves they shouldn't be making. Getting greedy." "So you're a mobster," I stated flatly. It wasn't a question. He didn't flinch. "I am a businessman. My business is power. And sometimes power requires unpleasant negotiations." He took a sip of his coffee. "The Falcones are vultures. They prey on the weak. They are unprincipled. Now, it seems, they have become aware that I have a new house guest." The implications of his words hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Me? They know about me?" "News travels fast in my world," he said grimly. "They will see you and your son as a vulnerability, a weakness they can exploit." "Oh God," I breathed, my hand flying to my mouth. I had not only endangered myself, but I had put Leo in the crosshairs of a mob war. "Do not be afraid," he said. his voice firm. He reached across the table and, for the first time, he touched me, his fingers wrapped around my wrist. His skin was warm, his grip strong and reassuring. The contact sent a jolt of electricity up my arm. This is my world, Alara. I control it. They will not touch you. They will not get anywhere near you or your son. This house is a fortress. You are safer here with me than you would be anywhere else on the planet. Do you understand? I looked into his dark, serious eyes, and despite the terror his words inspired, I believed him. The gilded cage he had put me in was no longer just a prison. It was a sanctuary. He was using this new threat to justify my confinement, to chain me to him with fear, but it was working. The thought of leaving the safety of these walls, of taking Leo out into a world where men like the Falcons might be waiting, was unthinkable. I was trapped by my own fear, a fear he was now expertly cultivating. I understand, I whispered, my voice barely audible. He held my gaze for a moment longer, then released my wrist. The warmth of his touch lingered on my skin. Good, he said, his voice softening again. Now, finish your breakfast. Later, I will take you on a tour of the grounds. I want you to see for yourself how secure you are here. As I picked at my food, my appetite gone, a new, chilling thought occurred to me. Dante hadn't just stumbled upon me. He had been in that diner for a reason, a dangerous reason. My desperate act hadn't just pulled me into his life. It had placed me squarely in the middle of his war. Later that afternoon, after spending a blissful couple of hours with a happy, energetic Leo, who was exploring his new toys with wide-eyed wonder, Dante made good on his promise. He found me in the garden, a sprawling expanse of green lawns, vibrant flower beds, and ancient shady trees, all surrounded by a stone wall that was at least 12 feet high. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely impressed. From here, you couldn't see the city or any other houses. It was a self-contained world. Beauty is a form of defense, he said, coming to stand beside me. People underestimate its power. He pointed to the top of the wall. There are motion sensors, thermal imaging cameras, and pressure plates on the perimeter. The guards are armed and patrol in shifts, 24 hours a day. No one gets in or out of this estate without me knowing about it. He led me back towards the house, showing me the reinforced windows, the solid steel doors disguised as elegant woodwork, the panic rooms hidden behind bookshelves. It was overwhelming. The level of security was paranoid, absolute. It was the kind of security a man with many powerful enemies would need. Do you see now? He asked, as we stood once again in the grand foyer. You are protected. I see that you live in a prison of your own making, I said quietly. His jaw tightened. It is the price of power, a price I am willing to pay. He paused, his gaze softening as he looked at me. I did not choose this life, Alara. It was chosen for me, but I have learned to master it. He seemed about to say more, but then hesitated, a crack in the armor, a hint of something deeper, something tragic, beneath the surface. What do you mean? I prompted, my curiosity piqued. He turned away, walking over to a large painting that dominated one wall. It was a portrait of a beautiful, sad-eyed woman with dark hair and a gentle smile. My mother, he said, his voice low and tinged with an emotion I couldn't identify. She was a good woman, kind, gentle. She married my father, a powerful man in a dangerous world. He was supposed to protect her. He ran a hand over his face, a flicker of raw pain crossing his features before it was quickly masked. My father had enemies, but he also had weaknesses. He wasn't as strong as he should have been. He made a bad deal. He trusted the wrong people. And one day, his enemies came for him, but they took her instead. They used her to control him. He was a powerful man, but he was helpless to save his own wife from being terrorized in her own home. He fell silent, his knuckles white as he clenched his fist. The air was thick with his unspoken grief and rage. "What happened to her?" I asked softly. "She survived," he said, his voice flat and dead. "Physically, but they broke her spirit. She was never the same. She faded away, a ghost in her own house. I was 15. I watched it happen. I watched this strong, vibrant woman be destroyed by a weak man's failure to protect her. I swore on that day that I would never be weak, that I would never fail to protect what is mine." He turned to look at me, and his eyes were blazing with a fierce, possessive fire. "I will not fail to protect you, Alara." And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't just a whim, a beautiful object he wanted to possess. In his damaged, twisted way, he was trying to right the wrongs of his past. He saw in me a reflection of his mother, a woman left vulnerable by a weak man, a woman he could save. My desperation had called out not just to a crime boss, but to a wounded boy who had grown into a man determined to be the protector his father never was. It didn't make him any less dangerous. It didn't make my situation any less precarious. But it humanized him. It gave his monstrous actions a tragic, understandable motive. It made him infinitely more complex and infinitely more dangerous to the fragile walls I was trying to keep around my own heart. The next few days passed in a surreal haze. I fell into a strange routine. Mornings were spent with Leo, watching him grow stronger and more vibrant with each passing day. The dark circles under his eyes faded, replaced by the rosy glow of health. His laughter, free from the rattle of a cough, echoed through the grand, sterile halls of the mansion, breathing life into them. He was happy, he was safe. And for that, I was shackled to Dante Moretti by a debt of gratitude, so heavy it felt like lead in my soul. Dante was a constant, looming presence. He would join us for breakfast, his dark eyes watching me over the rim of his coffee cup. He would appear in the garden as I pushed Leo on a swing set that had been erected overnight. He never crowded me, never pushed, but he was always there, an observer in the new life he had curated for me. We had conversations, stilted and careful, about books, about the city, about everything and nothing. I was learning the rhythm of his world, the careful dance of living with a man who controlled my entire existence. The external threat of the falcons hummed in the background, a low-frequency anxiety. I would see Dante taking hushed, intense phone calls. I would see Roman conferring with grim-faced men in the driveway. The security around the estate seemed to tighten, the Terran guards more alert. Dante used it to his advantage, subtly reinforcing my dependence on him. "Stay away from the west-facing windows today," he would say casually, and I would obey without question, my heart pounding at the implied danger. But the more immediate threat, the one that had been the catalyst for this whole nightmare, was still unresolved. Liam, my ex, the source of my debt and my heartache. I hadn't heard from him, which was unusual. He typically called when he needed money, his voice a wheedling, pathetic whine. I hadn't told Dante my new address or phone number, but I knew with a chilling certainty that Dante knew how to find him. The confrontation came on a Thursday. I had just put Leo down for his nap when Roman appeared at the door of my suite. "Mr. Moretti requests your presence in the main drawing room, Miss Jensen." There was a gravity in his voice that set my teeth on edge. I followed him down the wide, sweeping staircase. The drawing room was another vast, intimidating space, decorated in shades of cream and gold, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the front driveway. Dante was standing by the window, his back to me, his hands clasped behind him. He looked tense, a coiled spring of dangerous energy, but he wasn't alone. Slumped in one of the delicate antique chairs, looking small and utterly pathetic, was Liam. My blood ran cold. He looked terrible. His clothes were rumpled, his hair was greasy, and his eyes were wide with a terror I recognized all too well. He had the look of a cornered rat. Two of Dante's impassive guards stood behind his chair. "Liam," I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. He jumped at the sound of my voice, his head snapping up. "Ilara, thank God, tell them who I am. This is all a misunderstanding." His voice was high and panicked. Dante turned slowly from the window. His face was a cold, hard mask of contempt. He didn't even glance at Liam. His eyes were fixed on me. "There is no misunderstanding," Dante said, his voice dangerously soft. "I know exactly who he is. He is the man who abandoned you and your sick child. He is the man who stole your money. He is a parasite." Liam shrank back in his chair, sputtering. "Now hold on a minute. I was going to pay her back. I just had a run of bad luck." "Silence," Dante commanded, and the word cracked through the room like a whip. Liam flinched as if he'd been struck, his mouth snapping shut. Dante walked over to a small table and picked up a thick folder. He tossed it onto the coffee table in front of me. "That is a full accounting of your gambling debts, Mr. Doyle. To the Falcons, among others, you owe over $50,000. You are a desperate man, and desperate men do stupid things." Dante then looked at me. "He came to your old apartment this morning, Ilara. When he found you gone, he went to the diner. He was making a scene, asking questions, drawing attention." My stomach churned. This was exactly what Dante had warned me about. Liam's desperation was a beacon, a spotlight that could lead danger right to my door, right to Leo's door. "So my men picked him up," Dante continued, his voice lethally calm. "And we had a conversation. And now we are going to finalize our arrangement." He turned his cold gaze back to Liam, who was visibly trembling. "You have two options. Option 1, I hand you over to the Falcons. They will not be pleased about your outstanding debt. I imagine your death will be slow and unpleasant. I will, of course, ensure they know that you have no further connection to Ilara, so your death will not cause any complications for me." Liam's face went ashen. "No, please." "Option 2, Dante continued, ignoring him. "You will sign these papers." He nodded to another set of documents on the table. "They terminate your parental rights to Leo, completely and irrevocably. You will cease to be his father in the eyes of the law. You will also sign a legally binding agreement to never come within 500 miles of Ilara or Leo again. You will not call, you will not write, you will not make any attempt at contact for the rest of your life." I can't just sign away my son," Liam protested, a note of false bravado in his voice. Dante smiled, a chilling, predatory baring of teeth. "He is not your son. A son is someone you provide for, someone you protect. You have done neither. You are merely a biological accident, an inconvenience that I am now removing." He gestured to a briefcase on the floor. Roman stepped forward and opened it. It was filled with stacks of cash. "In return for your signature and your permanent disappearance, I will give you this, $100,000, enough to pay off your debts and start a new life somewhere far away from here. If you ever break the terms of our agreement, If I ever hear your name again, I will find you, and there will be no second offer. There will only be option one. I stared, mesmerized and horrified. This was Dante's power in action. Not just violence, but the cold, calculated application of wealth and intimidation. He was buying my son's freedom from a man who had never deserved him. He was erasing Liam from our lives as easily as he might swat a fly. Liam looked from the money to Dante's face, to the impassive guards, and finally to me. His eyes were pleading. Alara, you're going to let him do this? I looked at this weak, selfish man who had caused me so much pain. I thought of the nights I had cried myself to sleep, the terror of not being able to afford medicine for my son. And I looked at Dante, this terrible, magnificent monster who was offering me a clean slate, a future free of this man's poison. There was no contest. Sign the papers, Liam, I said, my voice cold and steady. The last bit of fight went out of him. Defeated, he slumped in his chair. Give me the pen, he muttered. I watched as he scribbled his name, signing away his son, his past, our history. It was a surgical, brutal, and utterly effective solution. When it was done, Dante's men hauled Liam to his feet. Roman handed him the briefcase. There is a car waiting to take you to the bus station, Roman said. I suggest you be on the first bus heading west. They dragged him out of the room. I was left alone with Dante, the signed papers sitting on the table between us like a treaty. I was shaking, a strange mixture of relief, disgust, and a dark, unsettling gratitude. He had done a monstrous thing, and he had done it for me. It's done, he said, his voice soft again. He's gone. He will never hurt you again. I looked up at him, at this man who had ripped my old life out by the roots. You enjoyed that, I whispered. He didn't deny it. He walked over to me, his presence overwhelming in the suddenly silent room. He crouched down in front of me, so his eyes were level with mine. I enjoy protecting what's mine, Alara, he said, his voice a low, intense murmur. And make no mistake, you are mine. Before I could process the raw possessiveness of his words, he leaned in and pressed a soft, brief kiss to my forehead. It was not a kiss of passion, but of ownership, a brand. Then he stood up and walked out of the room, leaving me trembling in the golden afternoon light, my freedom bought at a terrible and wonderful price. The confrontation with Liam left me reeling. Dante had surgically removed the primary cancer from my life, and he had done it with a casual brutality that was both terrifying and intoxicating. The rest of the day, I felt untethered, floating in the strange new reality he had built for me. Liam was gone. The word echoed in my mind. Gone. No more wheedling phone calls. No more broken promises. No more looking over my shoulder. The relief was so profound, it was almost painful. That evening, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The air grew thick with a tense, focused energy. I saw more guards than usual, their movements crisp and purposeful. Dante was sequestered in his study for hours. When he finally emerged, he was dressed in a simple black t-shirt and dark pants, a practical uniform that seemed to highlight the dangerous potential in his every muscle. He found me in the library, where I was curled in a leather armchair pretending to read. Alara, he said, his voice taut. I looked up. His face was grim, his jaw set. I have to go out for a few hours. My heart clenched with a sudden, sharp fear. This was it. This was about the Falcons. Is it dangerous? I asked, my voice small. It's business, he said, evading the question. Roman will be here. The estate is on full lockdown. No one gets in or out. You and Leo will be perfectly safe. I need you to stay in your suite and not open the door for anyone but Roman. Do you understand? Yes, I whispered. I understood all too well. He was going to war, and he was going, in part because of me, because the Falcon saw me as his weakness. The thought was nauseating. He hesitated, then walked over to me. He crouched down, just as he had after Liam had left, bringing his face level with mine. I will be back, he said, and it was a vow. He reached out and cupped my cheek, his thumb stroking my skin gently. The gesture was so at odds with the violence I knew he was capable of, it made my breath catch. Don't be afraid. Be careful, I whispered, the words escaping before I could stop them. My concern for him was a betrayal of my own fear, a sign of how deeply I was already entangled. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Always. He stood, and then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hall before being swallowed by the vast silence of the house. The hours that followed were the longest of my life. I went to my suite and locked the door, my hands trembling. Leo was already asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm gathering outside the walls of our sanctuary. I couldn't sit still. I paced the luxurious carpet of the living room, my mind a maelstrom of horrific images. I imagined Dante hurt, or worse. The thought of him not coming back, of being left in this huge, empty house without its master, was suddenly a terrifying prospect. When had this happened? When had this dangerous, possessive man become the anchor of my world? I looked out the window, but all I could see was the reflection of my own pale, worried face in the darkened glass. The beautiful garden was shrouded in blackness. The silence of the house was absolute, a heavy blanket that smothered all sound. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I thought about his mother, the sad-eyed woman in the portrait. I thought about his vow to never be weak, to always protect what was his. He was out there now, being the man his father wasn't, being the monster he felt he had to be, and he was doing it to protect me, his newest, most complicated possession. It was well after midnight when I heard the faint sound of cars on the gravel driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. I rushed to the window, peering through a gap in the heavy curtains. It was his convoy of black SUVs, returning as silently as they had left. The doors opened and his men got out. They moved with a grim, weary efficiency, and then I saw him. Dante stepped out of the lead car. He was alive. The relief that washed over me was so intense. My knees went weak, and I had to grip the windowsill for support. He stood for a moment, speaking in a low voice to Roman. Even from this distance, I could see the exhaustion in his posture. As he turned to walk toward the house, he passed under one of the portico lights, and I saw it. A dark, angry gash on his cheekbone, fresh and bleeding, and his knuckles were bruised and raw. He had been in a fight. He was hurt. The sight of his injury, however minor, pierced through my fear and went straight to the nurse in me, the caregiver. Before I could think, before I could consider the implications, I unlocked the suite door and ran. I met him at the top of the grand staircase. He looked up, surprised to see me. His face was pale beneath his tan, and he looked utterly spent. The cut on his cheek was deeper than I'd thought. "You're hurt," I said, my voice shaking. "It's nothing," he grunted, trying to brush past me. "No," I said, finding a surprising firmness in my voice. I put a hand on his chest to stop him. His body was tense and hard as rock. Through the thin fabric of his shirt, I could feel the frantic beating of his heart. Or maybe it was mine. "It needs to be cleaned. Come with me." To my astonishment, he didn't argue. He let me lead him back to my suite, into the spacious marble bathroom. I sat him down on the closed lid of the toilet. He looked out of place, a dark, dangerous predator brought to heel in my pristine, feminine sanctuary. I opened the medicine cabinet, which was, of course, fully stocked with a first aid kit that would rival a small clinic's. My hands were steady as I took out antiseptic wipes, antibiotic ointment, and a butterfly bandage. The nurse in me had taken over, a familiar role in a world that was anything but. I knelt in front of him, my movements sure and practiced. "This might sting," I said softly, as I gently dabbed the antiseptic wipe at the cut on his cheek. He flinched, hissing softly through his teeth, but he didn't pull away. He just watched me, his dark eyes intense, tracking my every movement. The air in the small room was thick with unspoken things. The scent of him, sandalwood, leather, and the metallic tang of blood filled my senses. "The falcons?" I asked quietly, my eyes focused on my task. "They will no longer be a problem," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "For anyone." The finality in his tone sent a shiver down my spine. He had not just won, he had annihilated. I finished cleaning the cut and carefully applied a thin layer of ointment. My fingers brushed against his skin, and it was like a spark of lightning in the quiet room. His breath hitched. I looked up and my gaze was snared by his. The exhaustion was still there, but underneath it was something else, something raw and vulnerable. The mask was gone. I was seeing the man, not the monster. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "You were reckless." I chided gently, my voice trembling slightly. "You could have been killed." "It was a risk I had to take," he said, his eyes searching mine, "to ensure there would be no more risks to you." We were kneeling and sitting, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The rest of the world, the grand house, the sleeping child, the violence of the night, it all faded away. There was only the space between us, charged and humming with a tension that had been building since the moment I slipped that note under his bill. He lifted a hand, his bruised knuckles gently tracing the line of my jaw. His touch was hesitant, questioning. "Alara," he breathed my name, and it was a prayer, a confession. And then he leaned in, and the space between us disappeared. His lips met mine, and it was not the chaste kiss on the forehead. This was fire and desperation and 100 unspoken emotions. It was rough and tender all at once, a clash of his power and my surrender. His hand tangled in my hair, pulling me closer, deepening the kiss. I didn't pull away. I leaned into it, my hands coming up to frame his face, my fingers exploring the stubble on his jaw, the sharp line of his cheekbone. It was a kiss of gratitude, of fear, of a dangerous, dawning affection. It was the sealing of a pact made in a greasy spoon diner, a pact written in desperation and paid for in blood. When he finally pulled away, we were both breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed. "I was afraid," he confessed, the admission so startling, so out of character. I thought I had misheard him. "Out there tonight, I was afraid of not coming back to you." The confession shattered the last of my resistance. This powerful, untouchable man who commanded armies and erased his enemies was afraid, afraid for me. In that moment, he was not my captor. He was not a monster. He was just a man, a broken, dangerous, magnificent man who had torn my world apart and then rebuilt it around me. And I knew, with a terrifying, exhilarating certainty, that I was falling for him. The aftermath of the kiss, of his confession, was a profound and unnerving stillness. The storm had passed, both outside the fortress walls and within them. The threats, both personal and external, had been neutralized by Dante's brutal efficiency. Liam was a ghost, a bad memory bought and paid for. The falcons were a problem that no longer existed. The world was quiet, and in that quiet, there was only us. The next morning, I woke up in my own palatial bed, the sheets feeling impossibly soft against my skin. I had a vague memory of Dante walking me back from the bathroom, a hand firmly on the small of my back, before bidding me a quiet good night at my bedroom door. The intimacy of the night before hung between us, a tangible thing, the violence, the confession, the kiss. It had changed everything. I was no longer just his ward, his possession. I was the woman he was afraid of losing. The thought was both a comfort and a terror. I found him on the terrace, nursing a cup of coffee, the morning sun glinting off his dark hair. The cut on his cheek was neatly covered by the butterfly bandage I had applied. He looked up as I approached, and the usual mask of cool command was absent. In its place was a watchfulness, a hint of uncertainty that I had never seen in him before. "Good morning," I said softly, pouring myself a coffee from the silver pot on the table. "Good morning," he replied, his voice a low rumble. "Leo is with the physical therapist in the gym. She says his lung capacity has improved by 20% already. The news should have made me purely happy. And it did on one level. My son was thriving, but it was also another golden bar in my cage, another link in the chain of gratitude that bound me to this man. I sat down opposite him, the silence between us heavy with the memory of his lips on mine. "Dante, we need to talk," I began, my hands wrapped around my warm mug. He nodded slowly. "I agree." He set his cup down and leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. He looked tired, but resolute. "Ilara, I have done things. I have made decisions on your behalf without your consent. I brought you here against your will. I dealt with your ex-partner in a way that was final. I eliminated a threat that you were not even fully aware of. I have justified all of it to myself and to you as protection." I listened, my heart thumping a slow, heavy rhythm in my chest. I didn't know where this was going, but last night, he continued, his gaze unwavering, something changed. When I kissed you, it was not the action of a guardian protecting his ward, and your response, it was not that of a prisoner. He paused, searching my face. "I have built you a fortress, Ilara, but I realize now it is also a cage, and I will not keep you in a cage." My breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that you are free to go," he said, and the words, so simple, so long, awaited, struck me dumb. "The threats are gone. Liam will never bother you again. The falcons are no longer a concern. You are safe. I have arranged for a trust to be set up in your name. It contains enough money to ensure that you and Leo will want for nothing for the rest of your lives. I have also purchased a house for you in a quiet, safe neighborhood on the other side of the state. It is yours. The keys and the deed are on my desk. You can take your son, and you can leave. Today, you can go back to your life, or a better version of it, and never see me again." I stared at him, utterly stunned. This was it, the choice, the one I never thought I would get. Freedom, safety, financial security, everything I had ever dreamed of. He was giving it all to me, no strings attached. I could walk away from this dangerous man, this violent world, and raise my son in peace. It was the right thing to do, the sane thing to do. So, Why did the thought of leaving feel like my heart was being ripped out of my chest? I thought of my old life, the exhaustion, the constant, grinding fear, the loneliness, the quiet desperation that had been so loud it drove me to slip a note to a gangster in a diner. Then I thought of the last few days. I thought of Leo's laughter echoing in the halls. I thought of the profound relief of knowing he was safe and cared for. I thought of Dante, of his surprising moments of gentleness, of the tragic story of his mother, of the fierce, possessive way he looked at me. I thought of his confession, the raw vulnerability in his voice, when he admitted he was afraid of losing me. He had built me a cage, yes, but he had also built me a home. He had shown me a safety and a devotion I had never known. It was a twisted, dangerous kind of devotion, but it was real. And the thought of walking away from it, from him, was unbearable. And what if I don't want to go? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, but it carried across the space between us like a shout. Dante's carefully controlled expression fractured. A flicker of hope, of raw, unguarded emotion, lit up his dark eyes. What did you say? I stood up, my chair scraping against the stone terrace. I walked around the table until I was standing before him. I looked down at this powerful, dangerous man who had just handed me my freedom, and I saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. He was terrified of my answer. The realization gave me a dizzying sense of my own power. I don't want the house, I said, my voice stronger now. I don't want the trust fund. I don't want to leave. I took a breath, the words tumbling out, honest and true. My old life is gone. You destroyed it. And I'm glad. I don't want to go back to being that desperate, terrified woman in the diner. That isn't me anymore. I looked around at the beautiful, sun-drenched terrace, at the fortress that had become my sanctuary. This is my home now. My son is happy and healthy here. And I hesitated, my courage faltering for a second. And you? He prompted, his voice thick with emotion. He stood up slowly, so he was towering over me, his presence magnetic. And I want to be here, I finished, my gaze locked with his. With you. It was a conscious choice. A surrender, not the surrender of a victim, but the surrender of a woman choosing her partner, her future. I was choosing his world. I was choosing him. A slow smile spread across Dante's face. But it was not the cold, humorless smile I had seen before. This one was different. It was real. It reached his eyes, crinkling the corners, transforming his harsh, handsome features into something breathtaking. He reached out and pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. I buried my face in his chest, inhaling the familiar scent of him, my arms circling his waist. He was solid, real, and he was mine. I had to give you the choice, Alara. He murmured into my hair, his voice rough. I had to know that you were here because you wanted to be, not because you were trapped. I'm not trapped, I said, my voice muffled by his sweater. I'm home. He pulled back just enough to look down at me, his hands framing my face. The love and adoration in his eyes was so potent, so fierce. It stole my breath. Then stay, he said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. Stay and build a life with me. Be a mother to our son. Be my wife. Be my queen. My eyes widened at his words. Wife. Queen. He wasn't just asking me to be his lover. He was offering me everything. A partnership. A throne beside his. Dante, I started, overwhelmed. Don't answer now, he said, cutting me off with a gentle finger to my lips. But no, that is what I want. Everything. He leaned down and kissed me, and this time there was no violence, no desperation. It was a kiss of pure, unadulterated love and devotion, a kiss of beginnings. It was the promise of a future I never could have imagined, a future born from a single, desperate note. He took my hand, his fingers lacing with mine, a perfect fit. "Come," he said, his smile still in place. "I have something for you." He led me not to the cold formality of his study, but to his private bedroom, a space I had never seen. It was masculine and elegant, decorated in dark woods, charcoals, and creams, with another wall of glass that offered a panoramic view of the entire estate. He led me to his dresser, a large piece of dark mahogany. From the top drawer, he took out a small velvet box. My heart began to pound. He turned to me, his expression serious, almost reverent. "My mother," he began, his voice soft, "was broken by my father's weakness. But before that, she was the heart of this family. She was strong and she was loved. When she married my father, he gave her this ring. It was his mother's before that. It has been passed down through generations of Moretti women, the strong ones." He opened the box. Nestled on the black velvet was the most beautiful ring I had ever seen. It was a vintage design, a large, emerald-cut diamond flanked by two smaller sapphires, the color of a deep twilight sea. It was elegant, timeless, and radiated a sense of history and power. After she passed, my father gave it to me. He told me to give it to a woman who was stronger than he was, a woman who could be a true partner, a woman who would be the matriarch this family needs. He took the ring from the box, his large, calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. "I have been keeping it for you, Ilara, since the night I read your note." My breath hitched. "Dante, you didn't even know me then." "I knew," he said, his gaze intense and certain. "I saw the fire in your eyes, even when you were at your lowest. I saw your strength. I knew you were the one I had been waiting for." He took my left hand, his touch sending shivers up my arm. "I am not asking you to be my wife today. It is too soon. But I am asking you to accept this, to accept your place here, by my side, as my partner, my equal, the future mother of my children." He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. The weight of it was substantial. The feel of the cool metal on my skin was a shock. It was a brand, a claim, a promise, a manacle, and a crown, all in one. I looked from the stunning ring to his handsome, earnest face. Tears welled in my eyes, not of fear or sadness, but of a profound, overwhelming joy. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes." His face broke into another one of those rare, beautiful smiles. He lifted my hand to his lips and kissed the ring, his eyes never leaving mine. "My queen," he murmured against my skin. It was a declaration, a coronation. In the space of a few days, I had gone from a desperate waitress to the chosen partner of one of the most powerful and dangerous men in the city. We stood there for a long time, bathed in the morning light, my hand in his. The future was still an unknown country, and his world was filled with shadows I couldn't yet comprehend. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid. I was secure. I was cherished. I was loved. Later that afternoon, we were in the garden. Leo, his face alight with pure, unadulterated joy, was running across the vast, emerald lawn, chasing a soccer ball. His laughter was the most beautiful sound in the world, clear and strong. He wasn't just healthy, he was thriving. He was a different child from the pale, wheezing boy I had worried over for so long. I was sitting on a stone bench under the shade of a massive oak tree, watching him. Dante came up behind me, wrapping his strong arms around me from behind, his chin resting on top of my head. I leaned back against his solid chest, a sense of peace settling over me, so deep and complete it was almost dizzying. "Look at him," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "He is happy," Dante said, his voice a warm rumble against my ear. "He is safe. As are you." I twisted my hand in the light, watching the diamond and sapphires catch the sun, sending out brilliant flashes of blue and white fire. My gilded cage had transformed. It was no longer a prison, but a sanctuary, a kingdom, and I was not its prisoner, but its queen. The journey here had been born of terror and desperation, a chaotic fall into a world I never knew existed. But as I sat there, wrapped in the arms of my dark protector, watching our son laugh in the sun, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I had not fallen. I had been saved. I had found my way home. The quiet desperation was finally, blessedly, silent, and in its place was the loud, beautiful, and vibrant sound of a new life beginning.